And before we start, I'd just like to let you know we were Russian when we put this together. So please excuse any problems you may see. It's time to stop stalling and get on with the video. And without further ado, here it is.
In a country where the ruler doesn't know how to rule, causing discourse throughout the nation.
Okay, enough with the memes. Cause number 1, the fail of Tsarist rule. For 3 centuries, the position of Tsar had been held by the Romanov family. The Tsars ruled alone, with no representative body. But wait, what about the elected body that was created in 1905 called the Duma? We don't talk about that. It's irrelevant because it did nothing. Anyways, the Tsar was not popular among his people. Books and newspapers were censored. There was a secret police that operated to crush dissent, often executing people or deporting them to Serbia. Russian culture was forced upon everyone, which was called Russification, and as people started wanting change, opposition was banned, which led to some seeking more extreme measures. Cause number 2, the Russo-Japanese War. From 1904 to 1905... Oh, wait, I can just plagiarize the history of Japan.
What else is Western? That's right, it's conquering stuff. So what can we conquer? Korea. They conquer Korea, taking it from its previous owner, China, and then go a little bit further. And Russia rushes in out of nowhere and says, "Stop, no, you can't take that. We were going to build a railroad through here to try to get some warm water." And Russia builds their railroad, supervised by a ton of soldiers. And then when the railroad was done, they downgrade it to banana. Did I say downgrade? I meant upgrade. And Japan says, "Can you maybe chill?" And Russia says, "How about maybe you chill?" Japan is kind of scared of Russia. You'll never guess who's also kind of scared of Russia. Great Britain. So Japan and Great Britain make an alliance together so they can be a little less scared of Russia. Feeling confident, Japan goes to war against Russia, just for a moment.
After Russia suffered a humiliating loss from a puny country that was 45 times smaller, confidence in the Tsar wavered. Cause number 3, World War I. Russia's involvement in the Great War yielded over 3.3 million Russian deaths. This was more than any other country that participated in the war. People were outraged. Going to fight practically ensured death. Cause number 4, rapid industrialization. The rapid industrialization of Russia caused urban overcrowding and poor living conditions for urban industrial workers. The growth of factories also brought with them grueling working conditions, miserably low wages, and child labor. The creation of a new working class, the proletariat, fueled the flames of a communist revolution that would be based on the basic principles of Marxism. Cause number 5, the royal scandal. While Tsar Nicholas II was off fighting in World War I, the royal palace was left to his wife Alexandra. Alexandra began seeking help from a mystic peasant named Grigory Rasputin in a desperate attempt to help her hemophilic son, Alexis. During this time, he was allowed to stay at the palace, and Rasputin began to gain political influence over the Tsar through his wife, while at the same time participating in lots of fun stuff, such as... Rasputin appointed his own church ministers and public officials. Eventually, a group of nobles carefully planned the assassination of Rasputin. Having been lured to a get-together of a wide array of women, he was served cakes and wine that were traced with massive amounts of cyanide. Much to their surprise, he was unaffected. Someone eventually got tired of waiting and shot him in the back with a pistol. This time, Rasputin hit the ground, but he began moving. He was shot 3 more times and fell again. After realizing he was still breathing, he was clubbed, castrated, tied up, and then thrown into a river where he finally drowned. Cause number 6, Bloody Sunday. In January of 1905, there was much labor unrest in St. Petersburg due to a rise in prices of food and other daily necessities. A priest named Father Capone decided to lead a group of workers to present a petition to the Tsar at the Winter Palace. The crowd peacefully marched around through the center of St. Petersburg, but police opened fire on the protesters and even chased them down on horseback after they began to scatter. Many were trampled to death during the panic. The death toll was estimated between a few hundred to a couple thousand. The Russians lost their faith in the Tsar as the great guardian of his people, although Nicholas himself did not even know of the violence until it was over. The March Revolution. In March of 1917, women textile workers in Petrograd led a citywide strike. 200,000 workers swarmed the streets shouting, "Down with the autocracy!" and "Down with the war!" At first, the soldiers obeyed orders to shoot the rioters, but later sided with them. The local protest exploded into a general uprising, and it forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate his throne. A year later, the Tsar and his entire family were executed. A provisional government was created and led by Alexander Kerensky. He continued fighting in World War I, which enraged soldiers and civilians alike. The Bolshevik Red Guards, led by Vladimir Lenin, quickly overthrew this new government and arrested all its leaders. Revolutionary movements begin to grow. Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, followed the beliefs of Karl Marx. He believed that the industrial class of workers should overthrow the Tsar, and that the industrial class would then form a dictatorship of the proletariat. In this state, the workers would rule. Lenin gained the support of the people by promising peace, land, and bread.
Peace, land, and bread. Everybody sing! Peace, land, and bread.
Lenin's rule. In 1917, after a couple months of fighting the Tsar's soldiers, Vladimir Lenin took over as the communist leader of Russia. Under Lenin's rule, he made many changes to society. For instance, he seized land from wealthy nobles in the Russian Orthodox Church and gave them to poor landless peasants. He ended Russia's involvement in World War I and jailed and executed political opponents as well as those who were loyal to the Tsar. Lenin also introduced the new economic policy. Under the NEP, peasants could sell surplus crops for profit, and small-scale capitalism was also implemented. Foreign investment was encouraged, and some industries could have private ownership. These new wealthy peasants were called kulaks. Creation of the USSR. The Bolsheviks changed their name to the Communist Party and organized Russia into self-governing republics called Soviets. They then renamed Russia into the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and it became the first communist nation. Stalin becomes leader. After Lenin's death in 1924, there was a battle of succession between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Lenin had his doubts about both men, but was most concerned about Stalin. In a statement before his death, he called for Stalin's removal and referred to him as rude, disloyal, and capricious. After Lenin's death, Stalin allied himself with two other members of the party who were opposed to Trotsky. Eventually, Stalin and his allies expelled Trotsky from the Communist Party and exiled him in January of 1928. 12 years later, on August 20th, 1940, he was murdered outside Mexico City with an ice pick, courtesy of Stalin. Stalin's rule. Just like Lenin, Stalin used a secret police to rule. His secret police used tanks and armored cars to stop riots. They monitored telephone lines, read mail, and planted informers everywhere. Those rumored to be disloyal were arrested and executed. In 1934, Stalin launched what was called the Great Purge, a campaign of terror directed at eliminating anyone against him. Stalin also controlled all newspapers, motion pictures, radio, and any other sources of information. Stalin did not tolerate individual creativity and only allowed art, media, and newspaper that either glorified the state or himself. 5-year plans. In order to become a leading industrial power, Stalin launched his first 5-year plan in 1928 by setting up a command economy in which the government made all economic decisions. Targets for industries were set that began rapid industrialization, much of which included electricity, coal, oil, pig iron, and steel industries. Trying to increase agricultural output, Stalin used the policy of collectivization by combining smaller private farms into large government-owned farms. In the first years of collectivization, agricultural production was estimated to rise 50%, but when it didn't, Stalin blamed it on the kulaks who resisted collectivization. Stalin used this excuse to try to completely eliminate the kulaks. Collectivization was also used to eliminate Ukrainians as nationalism binded them to Ukraine rather than the USSR. The result would be known as the Ukrainian Forced Famine, or Holodomor. During this time, Stalin starved more than 7 million Ukrainians. Some even resorted to cannibalism, stealing their neighbors' dogs and kids and eating them. I hope you enjoyed this summary of the Russian Revolution. I hope you learned something too. I know I learned that recording this at midnight while you have a cold for $20 is really not worth it.